Dive in the deep end, it's time to defend your movie.
Hello, friends, and welcome to our next episode of Defending Your Movie. I am your host, Jeremy Meyer. So today we're actually going to be talking about a movie. If you listen to our first episode, it was a conversation with Matthew Rory, which was a lot of fun, and I hope you got to check it out. But today we are actually talking about a movie. And this is one that I personally picked, being the first episode. It was something where I had to pick a movie to get the show started, and I decided to go with a movie that is kind of important to me for a couple reasons. The main reason is because I just legitimately love this movie. Like, Prometheus is one of my favorite sci-fi movies, and it's a movie that has kind of a stigma, so it's something that I wanted to make sure was covered on the show, just because I feel like it's a movie that has kind of a bad rap, and I think it's fucking great. I shouldn't swear, but I think it's great. So I kind of just wanted to have this be one of the early ones I talked about. Again, also because this movie is why I was a podcaster to begin with, and it's a little bit of a roundabout story, but basically my original podcast, the Shelved Film Podcast, wouldn't exist if it wasn't for reading an early script of Prometheus that was originally called Alien Engineers, and you can find that in the backlog of episodes in the Shelved Podcast, season. But yeah, so when it came time to do this show, I wanted to make sure that this was included, and I was like, honestly, it might as well just be the first episode. So I reached out to, my group of friends, or my growing group of friends, because this was actually an episode. So I did this with a man named Jesse Ferguson, who is also the host of a podcast called Recorded Tomorrow, which is a time travel podcast. I'd actually learned about it on the show. You'll hear about it at the end there. And he was, I met a bunch of people from another podcast called Film Rescue, and you're going to hear a lot from these people in the coming days, because a lot of them are my first guests, because, they've been so kind to me. I wanted to kind of show my thanks, and, I'm in their Discord, so I've reached out and got a lot of guests through there and have met some really interesting people. So a lot of my early guests are actually going to be coming from the Film Rescue Discord, and they've all been super nice, super great people. Jesse was the first one I podcasted with. This was actually the first episode I did record. I was debating of which ones do I want to post, but I do think the first one should be the first one. So I'm super excited for this to be kind of the first movie of the show. It was a really fun episode. Jesse was a really nice person, and we had a fun conversation, and it was actually his first time seeing the movie, which a lot of these movies are going to be the first time that I'm seeing them, because people are going to be picking movies that I've never heard of. So it's kind of fun to have that dynamic on the show where somebody is coming to it for the first time versus somebody who has a great passion for it. And I think that's going to be a common theme throughout the episodes. But before we get into the conversation, let's get the bookkeeping out of the way. As usual, you can follow our social medias at Defending Movie. Be sure to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Defending Movie. And then check out our merch store at belowthecollar.com/Defending Your Movie. And without further ado, here's our first Defending Your Movie episode on the sci-fi film Prometheus. Okay, so I'm so glad that this was the first time you saw this movie, because I remember my first time seeing this movie, and I will say I'll come from the point of the defendee that when I saw it the first time, first of all, I love this movie, and I know a lot of people don't. I will say that love had to grow on me. The first time I saw it, I liked fungus. Exactly. The first time I saw it, I liked it. I remember walking out of the theater I liked it, but I had some issues with it. But the more times I've watched it, it's now one of my favorite science fiction movies.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, you're gonna have to defend that.
Yeah, I'll see if I can. Let's see if maybe I can change your mind on it. But so was there a reason you hadn't seen it, or is it just one you had missed?
So I missed this one initially because there was a several year period in my life where I just didn't go see movies. So I missed this one in theaters, and a lot of people said it was bad. So I never really made an effort to go see it or to find it and watch it once it was available at home. And then Alien Covenant came out, and I watched that in the theaters, and I hated it.
That'll be another
So,
episode for sure. I
so
have more positive feelings about Alien Covenant than other people. So
yeah, definitely more than me. But I watched that one, was not impressed. So didn't again just strengthened my reason of like I really don't have any reason to seek this one out until now.
yeah.
And I have sought it out, and I will say I did not hate it.
Yeah, so what just kind of like your overall feeling about like maybe if you had to put a letter or a number to it, like where are you sitting with it on an initial viewing?
Oh geez. Initial viewing, I would say like 5 to 6 out of 10.
Okay.
Like I said, I didn't hate it. There were a lot of structural issues and a lot of things that kind of felt like Ridley Scott was just throwing a bunch of shit at the wall to see what would stick. And that always sort of bothers me. Like I feel like we don't need, I don't know how far we want to go into this. I assume there's going to be spoilers and everything like that.
So I
but
mean, we'll just assume everybody has. I mean, the movie came out in 2012 as well, so we'll just
yeah,
assume everybody
statute of
knows the
limitations
movie.
is past here. But like we've got, I don't know, 5, 6 different monster movies here that are all kind of competing for attention, and none of them are the Alien, which I guess is fine because it's a prequel, and the alien doesn't exist yet. And oh yeah, it turns out David made the alien because why not? But
Yeah.
It's yeah, like we I feel like, and I get that they sort of explain that by saying that this is the laboratory and they're trying to find they're trying to find a good way. So there was a bunch of different experiments for methods of killing people. But I feel like we didn't need that. I feel like there could have been maybe 2, as opposed to the Jesus. There was the snake thing. There was there were the spores.
Well, the spores were in Covenant. There are no spores in this one.
Yeah, there are. That's the Haverford guy. He got some shit in his eye or something and got infected.
Okay.
Maybe I missed something.
Okay, so let me point it out this way.
Okay.
In a way, there are 2 monsters. One is the engineers, and the other is the black goo. Because everything else stems from the black goo. The snake thing. So I missed this the first time I saw it. The snake things happen from the worms in the cave. So when the black goo is seeping out of the jar, there's like a shot of somebody's foot stepping in the dirt, and you see these little like grub like worms or whatever. And when some of this gets revealed in Covenant, is what the black goo basically does is it's like an evolutionary accelerant. So it mutates things. So when it hits the worms, it mutates them into that like snake thing. And because it was designed as a weapon, so it always mutates things into a more aggressive
something
version.
Ravenous and deadly and aggressive. Yeah.
The thing in his eye, Holloway, the Charlie Holloway character, that is because David put it in his glass, because he asked him how, what would you do to find out your answers, and he says anything, and he sticks his finger in the glass and then he drinks it. So what that is it's mutating inside of him. And then when they sleep together later, that's why she has the thing inside of her, because it transferred inside of her from them having sex. Which is a very complicated way to get to that kind of creature. But it's just the way the goo like affects everything it comes in contact with.
Right.
Which is, again, even though we're not talking about Alien Covenant, that is what he does in Alien Covenant, is just crossbreeding it with all these different things. It's interesting that you saw that one first, so that gives you a really interesting perspective on this movie.
Yeah, and that might have shaped things, but I guess going into it knowing that David was turning into a psychotic bastard sort of colored all of his actions the whole way through. But it felt like he was like mustache twirlingly shady.
I'd say he's a
Right.
lot more evil in this one than in Covenant, even. Like, having watched them both back to back, he's more of a dick in this one.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, I mean, that's fair.
if you go into Covenant, you kind of already know that he's bad if you've seen Prometheus. Like,
Mhm.
I'm curious about how Covenant worked with you, having not seen Prometheus, with the David turn, I guess.
I don't know. Again, it didn't really feel like a turn because he just you know how in like Kabuki theater where they have the like evil character, like the lying deceptive character always like
Yeah.
flips their eyes back and forth so the audience knows up front that they're the one who is like evil and shady and lying.
Yeah.
It felt like the David that they found was doing that the whole time, even in Covenant. Like he was just projecting that he's a bad guy
Yeah.
from
And
the start. From the moment we meet him, I'm like, oh, he's a bad guy.
yeah, and coming from Prometheus, you kind of know that already. Like, I mean, the end
Mhm.
leaves him a little more ambiguous of like him calling out to Shaw for help and stuff like that. Um, but he does a lot more bad things in Prometheus. Like, because I rewatched both of these over the last week, which is kind of why I wanted to talk about this one.
Right.
And I definitely felt like, oh, like his descent in Prometheus is so much harder than in where he is in Covenant.
Mhm.
But yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean, there's
I also
definitely things that you can miss. Like I miss the worms thing, you miss the glass thing.
Mhm.
I do feel like if you're kind of not zeroed in on it, I think Prometheus is a movie that benefits from multiple watchings for that reason.
Yeah, and it probably does demand more of your attention than I was able to give it today while I was watching it in a third monitor at work.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like even with that, even if we say like, okay, so the black goo is the monster and it's manifesting in a whole bunch of different ways, it still felt too busy to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like there were too many, like there are too many manifestations of that, and it does the same thing that the Alien franchise is famously bad about, where we have a creature who can, you know, increase its size by tenfold without eating anything,
Yeah.
seemingly. um like at the end where the thing that got Gray, her name was Gray, right? Numi
Shaw.
Shaw, sorry.
Shaw.
Who's Gray? Is Gray the one that looks just like her in Covenant?
Are you talking about the main character in Covenant?
Yeah.
She's Daniels.
Okay.
There might
Then
maybe
Gray is
one of the
nobody.
other yeah, maybe.
Gray is nobody. I just made that
I mean,
up.
this movie has a lot of characters. I don't remember all of their names all the time.
That was another thing. Like they kept just showing us new people.
Yeah, there are quite a few. And like again, when you see it a few times, you kind of know the ones you actually need to pay attention to because a lot of
Right.
them are just in the background.
That's fair.
But it's basically Holloway and Shaw, which are the couple, and then
Mhm.
David Vickers, the captain,
Yep.
and Idris
Idris
Elba's
Elba.
character is a character I never remember his name. But yeah, no, there's definitely a lot going on. One of my damn it, I had a thought and I just lost it.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah, I was just about to make what were we just talking about?
We were talking about Shaw and the alien that grows 10 times without eating anything.
Yeah, the one that she pulls out of her,
the one that she pulls out of her uterus.
Yeah, what did you think of that scene? Because in the theater, that was my favorite moment.
I actually thought that was pretty good. Like the little squid-like thing that she pulled out, I thought was fine. I did find it weird that like the table would do a cesarean section without any anesthesia,
because it's specific. Well, I think it does give her something. Because it
did like a local, like topical on the skin anesthesia, but like she's screaming as it's cutting into her and opening everything up and all that, and she had to do her own.
Oh, whatever she just rips the cord out and stuff.
Like, well, yeah, she like ripped the cord out, but I mean, like she like stabbed herself with what looked like an EpiPen,
oh yeah, she does.
But I'm assuming it was an anesthetic.
Yeah, because I think she's hitting herself with those more throughout the movie as well from that
Mhm.
point on. Like when they're walking into the ship, she's like kind of hitting more. I think it's supposed to be like morphine or something.
Right. Yeah, that weirded me out a little bit. But no, that like that scene actually was legitimately really cool.
Yeah,
I
and
will
I
credit where due.
in Covenant is the same. I think the med bay scene in Covenant is probably the best scene of that movie as well.
Yeah, I would agree.
Um, I think one thing most people agree on with both of those movies is visually they are incredible.
Yeah.
Like Ridley Scott can shoot the hell out of a movie. The production design is top notch. I really like a lot of the technical aspects of this movie. The music I didn't care about at first, but the more times I've watched it, it really grew on me. I really like the score for both of those movies, actually.
Yeah, I didn't
Um,
have a problem with the score. I thought it didn't jump out at me, but it wasn't offensive.
yeah, the first few times I saw it, it did not either. But then when I kind of listened to it on its own, and then there are
Sure.
specific moments like it's kind of hauntingly beautiful at times if you're like really focusing on it, and then other times it's got this kind of like the theme of the movie is kind of an upbeat theme, and it
Hmm.
does kind of play into some of the like the thematical elements of the movie that I like, and at some point we'll touch on here.
Yeah.
But I have a pretty unique perspective on this movie because with my last podcast shelved, the original script for this movie is what gave me the idea for the podcast,
Oh
which is
wow.
I
Okay.
read the original script when it was still an Alien movie because it was
All
originally
right.
called Alien Engineers. And
Nice.
most of the movie is pretty much the same, except the black goo is not existent. It is like alien eggs, essentially.
Okay.
Well, if I recall, because so instead of him getting sick and then like impregnating her, he gets infested with something. I think he gets infested with some sort of alien because they just
Hmm.
find him after like he was unconscious in the cave or something. And then a different type of alien, actually the alien from Alien Covenant, like the white one, like the
Hmm.
protomorph or whatever, that comes out of him in the ship, and it can like it's got like no bones or whatever, so it can kind of slick through like tight spaces and stuff like that.
Gross.
It's pretty weird. And then towards the end of the movie, you start seeing more classic aliens. So instead of like the black goo that they were going to send to Earth, it was like eggs.
Hmm.
Um, so
And
that
that
was
makes
how,
sense.
yeah. And honestly, I like both versions. So I've also dived into YouTube videos. There's a 3 hour documentary on the Blu-ray. And like when I first walked out of the movie, I had a lot of questions. Like what, why did they want to kill us? And all like some of the questions that Shaw has on
Why didn't
later.
anybody think to run sideways?
Yeah, that is the one moment I will not defend, and the one thing that everybody has on me. I'll give that one up.
I
Um,
couldn't not mention it.
yeah, and it's a fair criticism. I have less of a problem with it. Like you could argue, oh, maybe the terrain wasn't so they could run side, but I'm pretty sure there's a wide shot, and they had
No,
plenty of room.
it's a super wide shot. There was plenty of room, and
Yeah,
even like Shaw even like trips and then just rolls
yeah, that's
sideways
true.
to get out of the way.
That's one of
So-
those things I give up to. Like, hey, it's a movie. You gotta put tension in there, but it's kind of unforgivable. Um, but yeah, so I've dug into a lot of this movie to the point where I have those questions answered for me now because
okay,
the movie's been out long enough that Ridley Scott has spoken on a lot of it.
sure.
And um the thing that grabs me about and it's hard to use this as a defense because it is not in the movie,
Hmm.
but like the elements of it are still there is the fact that engineers were basically God.
Right.
And the opening scene of the movie, which I think most people forget about by the time the movie ends, is when the engineer seeds life on Earth, when he drinks the goo and he falls into the water and they show DNA. Like
Is that what he was
that's
doing?
what he was doing.
Okay.
And so Ridley Scott flat out says the reason the engineers wanted to kill us is because we killed Jesus. And Jesus was in one version he says Jesus was an engineer, and another, or so there's this other YouTube video I watched where a guy dived into a bunch of early scripts, and he had, so the scene where they released the engineer at the end, there was
Hmm.
actually a bunch of dialogue there, and there is a
Right.
deleted scene on the Blu-ray, but it's not translated, but in the original scripts it was. And the engineers talk as if they are like biblical, like the way like a
Okay.
lot of, so like a lot of like religion it's essentially like it's ancient aliens is all it is.
Sure.
The engineers were ancient aliens. And it was like, hey, we gave you life, we gave you Eden, which is what they call Earth. So it's like, okay, you know, that makes sense. And he's like, we were so proud of our creation, and we just sat back and watched you destroy yourselves. And so we took one of you, brought him to us to educate him, and then brought him back, and then you just killed him. So we just decided like you just weren't worth, you didn't deserve it, type thing. And so like that totally drags me in. Like I'm not a religious person, but that stuff kind of fascinates me. And I kind of like the way they do it in a way that makes sense in a little bit. But again, none of that's in the movie.
Right. I mean, that would have been compelling if there was some way of like, I don't know if that had been recorded somewhere.
Yeah. And like I said, there are elements of it.
I say if that had been recorded, even though like one of the things that I didn't really care for in the movie is how much they relied on, you know, security footage to piece together what happened.
Yeah, like the holograms and stuff.
Yeah.
Which was another thing in the original script. So like their technology, like, so even when they pilot the ship, you can see it has all that like holographic stuff above the controls. In the script, it's pointed out that David can see that stuff and others can't. That when they're walking through the caverns and stuff, he can see there's like this light and technology going on, but the humans can't. That's why he's able to open the door.
Interesting.
But that never made it into the movie. Again, there's all these interesting ideas that it's like because I have the burden of knowing all this stuff, I end up kind of liking it more, even though it's not spelled out.
Right, because you're inferring. You're at this point you're almost watching a different movie,
yeah, in a way,
than the rest, or you're projecting what this movie could have been onto what it actually is.
Yeah, and I will say I do like the movie for what it is, but it is like over the years, you know, I've probably watched this movie like 10 times, and because it used to be a movie I would kind of just throw on and like it would just be on in the background.
I can see that.
And now weirdly Alien Covenant has like, I don't know what it is about these movies. I like that it's a big sci-fi movie that kind of wrestles with pretty serious themes, and it doesn't really treat the audience like an idiot. And it, you know, it's a big budget sci-fi movie. Like we don't get a lot of that. And I think I just appreciate that.
I think this, it could have benefited from, I mean, because the theme of like the nature of God and the nature of man is very prevalent throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, even in Covenant, there's still some in there.
Yeah, and I think that this is about to turn into an episode of the Film Rescue, but I think it could have benefited more from really playing into Shaw's faith.
Yeah,
especially because like if we're working under the assumption that like even if we go back to the central premise of the engineers essentially they're Noah's arking everything because they've decided that humanity has screwed itself over and they're pissed off because humans killed Jesus, right? Killed their version of Jesus. Like the fact that theoretically the engineer should have recognized the cross that she had, like the cross necklace at that point, because he would have known that was what that was. So having a, like, if he had woken up and even if he hadn't gone through everything, but like if after David had spoken, if he had just like knocked David out of the way and then killed everybody, but stopped at Shaw, because he saw the necklace, and then theoretically if David was still alive, David could have then started translating and we could have had a little bit of exposition to that point. I think it would have been a lot more powerful that way.
Yeah, because in the deleted scene that they have, it's like a very brief conversation, and something that one of the original scripts does is it does translate the engineer versus in the movie David is translating the engineer, but in the original, but no, in the deleted scene.
Oh, okay.
In the scene that is, so if this scene had made it into the movie, it's on the special features or whatever, but he's actually lying about what the translation is to some point. He's translating it, but he's kind of leaving stuff out. Like,
right.
in the movie
He's
like,
fudging the translation.
yeah, like in the deleted scene, there's like, it's kind of the engineer says a lot, and Dave is just like, he wants to know why we're here. But like, if you like on the special features on like the Blu-ray, there's like a documentary and stuff, you can see some of this stuff. They show that like the engineer like says a lot more than what David's letting on, because
Gotcha.
as we find out, David has a sort of god complex.
Yeah, a bit of an agenda.
Yeah,
Because I'm assuming, I don't know if there are different versions of this movie or whatever, but in the version I watched,
there's just the one.
The engineer doesn't say anything. It's just
No.
David starts talking and tries to introduce himself, and the engineer rips his head off and then goes on a rampage.
Yeah, and honestly, I like the way the movie leaves a lot of unanswered questions. It was something that bothered me the first time I watched it, but then as I watched it more and kind of looking at it from a like screenwriting perspective, it's like, it's kind of like the answers don't matter because the story is about the characters. And it's all just kind of like the horror of it.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if I can accept that it's about the characters if there's no growth to any of the characters throughout the whole movie, though. And in the end, everybody dies.
Because I'm trying to think, is there growth? Because even Shaw, when she finds out, it's like, hey, her boyfriend's like, well, you can take that necklace off because you know who made us. And she's like, yeah, well, who made them? Yeah, there is, I guess, no real change to her character other than she wants to continue on the mission.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, like her motivation goes from finding, questioning the nature of existence, trying to find our creators, our God, to wanting to interrogate our God.
Yeah, well, I mean, because the closest she gets to changing from that is they want to kill us and we can't let this ship get to Earth. So if you have to kill this ship or whatever. Like she's willing to kill them even though she knows who they are. But yeah, and that, that was a big problem with Covenant, is we were kind of hoping some of that would get answered to that, but then they just killed her off.
Yeah.
Which, my biggest problem with Covenant is the fact that it is an alien movie, because my favorite thing about this movie is that it's not an alien movie. And to me, the strongest parts of Covenant is when it's a sequel to Prometheus and not a prequel to Alien.
Yeah, I think honestly this film is harmed by its connection to the Alien franchise.
Yeah, and which is weird because that's kind of my favorite part about it. Like, I like that it takes place in the world. I wish it didn't have to then tie into it.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's because it seems to me like if you're gonna set it here, you're dealing with the engineers, which have already been talked about in the in previous movies. You're dealing with that, and you have a shape-shifting, body parasitic alien creature. It's like they set themselves up as like, it feels like they had tried to have their cake and eat it too, like be able to say like, so. we want to remind you that this is part of the Alien franchise, but we also don't want to deal with, like, we don't want to have to deal with any silly things like continuity or thematic relevance to the Alien franchise.
Yeah, and a big question is, so the ship crashing on there, a lot of people would assume like, oh well, then this must be the planet from Alien, but obviously the atmosphere is very different. But no. I think I can't remember how many years. There's a significant year gap between this and when Alien takes place. So technically the planet could be classified under a different name, because they do say the name of the planet or whatever. But I remember when the movie was announced, they're like, hey, we're making an Alien prequel. But then when they were making it, they're like, oh, it's not really a prequel. It's kind of its own thing. And to me, I wonder how much of what feels like Alien in this movie was pressure from the studio. And I think a lot of that, or a lot of pressure from the studio, explains Covenant, of like, no, you got to get aliens in there. Like, I think he's been pretty open that he didn't want to put aliens in Covenant, and he wanted to save it for the third one.
Right.
which I would have preferred. But for what it was, I'm like, this is fine, I guess, for that second one. But like, to me, the strongest elements of this are when I'm not thinking about Alien, where it's kind of just its own sci-fi movie dealing with these
Sure.
heavy issues that I think it deals with in a pretty interesting way. And like, it's a movie that I have never seen before, which is kind of what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I'm making a face at that. Again, it just goes back to like you say that it takes these themes and deals with them in an interesting way, and I would counter with, does it though?
It's a fair counter. um I guess to me, what's interesting, and again, is it's a problem with the movie, is a lot of the stuff I find interesting isn't in the movie. It's in a
Right.
lot of the extra stuff. But
Yeah, the movie's a lot better if you've read the supplemental
yeah.
novelization and the prequel comic. And
Oh, there actually is a sequel comic to this that is pretty incredible.
is it?
It's, you can't even think you can, well, you can find individual physical copies, but they did a series called Fire and Stone, but
Okay.
it's Prometheus, Alien, and Alien versus Predator. So it's like Prometheus, Fire and Stone, Alien, Fire and Stone, Predator, Fire and Stone, and then Alien versus Predator,
Interesting.
Fire and Stone. And it's about like a team that lands on this planet like years later, and like what has kind of happened. And it's a pretty, like, the hard copy edition, which you can't even get anymore, it's like a book like 13-14 inches tall, and it's like a thick hardcover.
It's $200 on eBay.
Exactly. It used to be like $40, but I think it's out of print. But you can still get the individual books of Prometheus, Alien versus Predator, or whatever. I have it digitally on my iPad, so I have the full book. And then there's a sequel to that also called Life and Death, and it's the same concept, but it's like one big story, and it's actually a really good follow-up to this movie.
Okay.
More so than Covenant, but it is, it's not dealing with the kind of stuff that this movie is. It is more of like, hey, this is like an Aliens movie and a Predator movie, just in this same universe or whatever. I do highly recommend that, though.
Good to know.
But
$200 to spare.
Yeah, or if you do digital, the digital version's great. But no, I like that this is Ancient Aliens, the movie. Which is like a thing I never thought I would say. But no, I am, it's a movie I love to watch, I will admit, because of the visuals. I think all the performances are really great. I like a lot of the characters, and I like Holloway, how he kind of he's like the shitty one, like, hey, you made this great discovery and you can't be happy about it just because you didn't get everything you wanted. Which it maybe is a metaphor for the movie, because you don't get everything you want, and unfortunately that's how life is sometimes.
I will say, like, talking about having it on and stuff like that, having now seen it, it's not something that I would seek out and just put on, but it's totally inoffensive, to the point of, like, if I went over to your house and you're watching Prometheus, I'll sit down and watch it with you.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I'm not gonna be like, oh, Prometheus, get that shit out of my timeline. It's not Pixels.
Oh God, no. And I would say the same thing about Covenant. Like, when I first saw that, I was like, ooh, I don't know if I like this, but I was like, oh, well, I'll give it another shot. And again, the more I watch it, the more I find to appreciate about it. And I do think there's a way more to appreciate about Prometheus. Covenant is carried by Michael Fassbender.
I would agree. Yeah.
Which he is the best part of both movies. I mean, that dude's a national treasure.
He is really good at being a creep.
Yeah, and I love him as David. Like, I honestly hope, and I know there was rumblings that he might get to. He was gonna do another movie, Ridley Scott, and I honestly hope he kind of gets to finish it. Just because, like, Covenant is such kind of a hanging ending, because that movie ends on a cliffhanger, which I guess is something Ridley Scott wanted to do since the original Alien, and kept getting told no, and that was the one time he was allowed to do it. And now with the whole Disney thing, who knows, that's probably never going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
I hope it. I would like to see this get at least a proper ending. Like, just give them one more, make it a trilogy, and be done with it. Um, Covenant didn't not make money, but it didn't make a lot. I think it was in the ballpark of
Yeah.
like 600 million on like a 200 million budget. So who knows if they
That's not
made
too bad.
profit.
Yeah.
But they might have. But and in reviews, I think were like middle of the road.
Yeah. That one was less fine than this
Yeah,
one. Like
yeah.
this I would not argue. Like I would even go so far as to say this was fine.
Yeah.
I still don't think this was, I would not say that it was good, but I'm not gonna like I'm not gonna fault you for thinking it was good, if that makes sense.
Yeah. We're
And
all here to be positive.
yeah. But I will easily happily say that it was fine. And I'm not sure that I would do that for Covenant, which I haven't seen since I saw it in the theater. So
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, so that was actually a case where I watched that one on a bootleg that like a friend had, just because I wasn't able to get to the theater, and he's like, hey, I have this movie, do you want to watch it? I was like, sure. So whenever I do that, I usually make a point to either
sure.
buy the Blu-ray or watch it in HD in some form, just because like, well,
Yeah.
I need to give this an actual chance. I
Mhm.
did the same thing with Venom. So
I still haven't seen that
it's
for mostly the same reason. Like
uh
I missed it in theaters and just haven't cared enough to seek it out.
if that movie came out in 2004, we would have loved it. I think it's kind of okay.
I'm probably gonna have to track it down because the sequel looks like it's gonna be a lot of fun.
I'm super interested in that, actually. The trailer looks fun. And hey,
Mhm.
the best parts of that first one, I will say, I love Tom Hardy in that movie. Some people kind of shit on his like accent, I guess. Not accent, but like his
His
choice of,
affectation.
yes, like I thought he was fun. I like the interaction with him and the symbiote. I think that alone is kind of worth it. If you can, maybe not in the theater, but like if you have a way to watch it, I think it's worth at least checking out.
And that's what a lot of people I've talked to have said, that the first movie should have been was Felix and Oscar, but with or not Felix and Oscar. What am I thinking of? The oh Jesus, what was that old show with Jack Lemmon? Whatever, it doesn't matter. Cut this out. Odd Couple. That's what it was. That it was essentially that it should have just been the Odd Couple with Eddie Brock and
Yeah.
the symbiote.
Yeah, and those are the best parts of the movie. And there's a little bit of that in the trailer for the second one, if you saw the
Right.
trailer. No, that movie's quick. You're in and out. It feels like you barely even sat there. Prometheus a little longer. These are movies that the production goes a long way for me. It's great to look at. It's great to just like kind of let it wash over you. Like I said, I really enjoy the music. I enjoy the music more so in Covenant. That's actually my writing playlist. I really like that music for that composer. I think it's Jed Cruzel or something. I've watched 2 movies that he did the score for, and the movies are both kind of so-so, but I love the scores.
Nice.
I can't remember who did the score for Prometheus. It might have been the same guy who did the music for like the Metal Gear Solid games.
Interesting.
But
let's go see. We have
yeah, I'm
all
trying to
human knowledge at our fingertips.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull that up.
Prometheus.
Mark Streinfeld. He did American Gangster and Body of Lies, The Gray, the Wolf movie with Liam Neeson.
Okay.
And then the Poltergeist remake. He hasn't done a lot, and I've only seen a few of these. But like I said, the music, I kind of didn't, like you said, it didn't really stand out to me the first few times, but it was one of those things. The more I watched it, I was like, oh, I actually really like what's going on here, especially during the ending stuff when like more of the horror is actually taking place. I think some of that stuff is really good. And yeah, it's actually one of like kind of, because it was actually the last time I watched it that I was like, oh, I'm like really digging this. So I might just
did Raised by Wolves too.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, the HBO show, right?
The Ridley Scott HBO show.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I only watched the first 3 episodes. I never went back to it, but I really enjoyed what I saw.
I haven't watched any of it. I
Oh,
should probably do that.
I enjoyed the first three because that was one of those ones they dropped three and then they came out weekly after that. So
Mm,
I saw the first three and then just kind of was busy and didn't go back to it. But
yeah.
I mean, there's just something about the Ridley Scott projects. I just love looking at them because Raised by Wolves was another one. It was really nice to look at, but
Right.
very dour. So that was why I didn't rush back to it. But I enjoyed everything that was kind of going on. But and you know, Prometheus shares that a little bit. Like, there's not a lot of positivity going on in this movie.
That's
um,
fair.
it does end with pretty much everybody dead except for Shaw. And then she's just stranded on this planet until like the
Well,
last 10 seconds.
yeah.
Um, which, yeah, the ending was pretty different in the original script. Was she was stranded and they were implying that a bunch of other engineers were going to be showing up.
Hmm.
One thing I do think is interesting about this movie is how, so they prepared to kill us about 2,000 years ago when we killed Jesus. So all this
Right.
technology is technically 2,000 years old from
Hmm.
wherever the engineers currently are. And then in Alien Covenant, that ship just shows up on the planet and everything. Nobody seems weird about it at all. It's just like, oh yeah, that's just one of ours. Like, are you going to
Hmm.
suggest to me that technology doesn't really advance in 2,000 years for an advanced
Yeah.
species?
Yeah, exactly. That would be like, you know, a yeah, I don't know. I guess you could say that would be like a Model T rolling into, your local chamber of commerce and nobody
Yeah.
batting an eye at it or even being like, "Oh, that's interesting."
Yeah. Um, I don't know. Like, that stuff just really grabs me about the movie. Like, the way it kind of ties into our religion. And I do almost wish they kept that deleted scene in there, but I do like that he's just like, no, and he just attacks them. And the one moment that kind of, for me in the movie, that makes me feel like he has a reason to is because Shaw tries to talk to him and that dude just like elbows her with the gun. And maybe he just, sees how horrible and aggressive we are. And he's just like, no, like, screw these people.
Yeah, I suppose. I still think, like, again, it if you're going to speak on the nature of God, you need to do something with that. And the fact that they didn't, that they had like they had Shaw there as like perfectly set up to be able to essentially comment on or give voice to the theme of the film and didn't, kind of bothers me.
Yeah, I mean, they only bring up her religion in like 2 scenes I can think of. It's when
Yeah.
she's dreaming in the beginning, and
Hmm.
then when Holloway brings it up after they discover the engineers, or like that they
Right.
are from them.
Hmm.
Um, I don't like there. Did you dive into like the alien lore about the space jockey like back in the day, like with that movie and stuff?
No, I did read. I read the novelization,
Yeah,
and again, that would have been like 20 years ago. But I haven't done any digging other than that.
yeah. I was always one of these like nerdy kids that's like, oh, I'm gonna read everything I can about everything when I had access to
Sure.
the internet. And I saw Aliens more than I saw Alien. So when I did
Hmm.
finally go back and like rewatch Alien, I was like, oh, I forgot about this like big alien creature with like its chest bursted in that scene and stuff. And I was like, that's fascinating. Why isn't that talked about more? And then finding out that it was just on the internet or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, for me, it was just kind of the satisfaction of like seeing what that was in this movie. Granted, it changed over the years. Like, I don't know how the novelization deals with it, but there's like comic books and stuff that kind of like, oh no, these were like weird aliens with trunks and stuff. And I kind of like, that's what I was kind of expecting in this movie because I didn't know anything going in other than like, hey,
Hmm.
it's supposedly an alien prequel. And seeing like, oh no, that was just like a helmet or
That was a
whatever.
helmet. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, yeah, the scene with the head, like I really like that scene. Like, I think this movie deals with mystery pretty well for the most part, up until the point where they're like, hey, you're not going to get any answers. but it definitely kept dragging me along. I'm like, well, I want to see what happens next. I want to know, why is this happening? What's up? What was up with that worm thing and stuff? And like,
Yeah.
having to watch it multiple times to find out, or like read about it. Like, I didn't pick up on the worms thing for a long time. I was always just like,
Mhm.
where did that thing come from? Because
Yeah.
I always miss it. It's kind of a throwaway shot.
hmm It probably says more about me than it does about the movie itself, but I kept getting taken out of the movie by just the characters doing stupid things with respect to, like,
This is
particularly
another
with
big moment, or another
what's
big
that?
complaint about this movie is the characters.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not going to complain about the characters themselves, other than, like
Well,
I
the
said, the fact that
actions of the
there
characters.
aren't really any arcs. But like, I I would be watching this, and it was really hard for me to be engaged when when I kept being like, okay, yeah, sure, there's air here, but you're on an alien
Yes.
planet. Why the hell are you taking your helmet off? And
Yeah.
you're dissecting this alien artifact here that has what looked to be, a spores or something growing out of it. Why is it not already in quarantine?
Well, they
And
had the
things
head
like
in
that.
like the
And
little quarantine box
no,
or
they
whatever.
didn't, though. They were right out in like open, touching it.
Well, they
Put
might
it
have
into quarantine when it started to fizzle and pop
Okay,
and
yeah, you're right,
everything.
because it is just sitting on the table and it
It's
slides
just
back
on the
in,
table.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a throwaway dialogue line where they scan it beforehand or whatever? I can't
There
remember.
might have been that I missed.
Yeah, because there is there is a moment before they take off their helmets, which, to be fair, everybody protests before that guy does. Like, no, don't do
Sure.
that. But they do say the air is cleaner than Earth's, but that doesn't mean you don't know what else, like any microbes or anything that could be in the air.
Yeah.
Another big one is the guys who get lost. And the guy, like, oh, he's smoking weed in his thing, like, yo, these guys are scientists, are you really going to expect them to be acting like this? My defense for that
I don't mind.
This
honestly.
is like a ragtag group that they threw together, and that even that dude's like, I'm here for money, man. Like,
Mhm.
this is the people they could get. You're probably not getting the best of the best. That being said, the dude trying to pet the snake thing also kind of dumb.
Yeah, that was that too, exactly. Like, watching it, he's like, oh, it's so beautiful, and he goes to grab, like, what are you why are you, what are you?
Yeah.
Oh,
Like, I get it, he's the biologist, like, he's gonna be a little more interested, but that thing was clearly not nice when you're reaching towards it and it's like flaring like a cobra.
well, and you just said it, he's the biologist, he should know better.
Yeah. Like, I guess you can make an argument that, like, oh, well, you don't know what kind of alien it is because it's an alien and you've never seen it. I'm like, it looked threatening to me.
Right.
I would
Exactly.
stay away
You
from
don't
it.
you don't know what kind of an alien it is, but you know what a snake looks like.
Yeah.
And what it means when a snake starts doing this. You know what angry posturing is.
Yeah.
That's pretty universal.
And it's always cracked me up. I don't know if you've ever seen the first Alien versus Predator movie, but that actor looks exactly like an actor in that movie. And it's always like, oh, what if they were the same guy? I don't think they are.
That would be hilarious. I'm pretty sure everybody died in that one.
In Alien versus Predator?
Yeah.
Everybody except the
for
main
the
girl.
woman.
Yeah. Which, that's a movie I could also talk about. I don't love it, but I think I like it more than most.
Yeah, that's another one that I again don't hate.
Yeah, my biggest complaint is it's not rated R.
Requiem.
Oh, that is awful. That is a god awful movie. It has like a couple things I would say about it. Like, at least it's violent, and like at least it's like some cool predator fighting alien action, but you can't see half of it because that movie has no lighting whatsoever.
Yeah. Not a fan of that one.
Yeah. Like, the helmet thing is actually, because that comes up in Covenant as well, but I think that is actually
really bugged me in that too.
I have a better defense for that one, though. I mean, not that it's the smartest decision, but I can understand it from a scared human level of they just watched their captain die. There's a lot of dialogue about how, like, no one is anxious to get back in those pods after what happened, and that they're all tired of being cooped up on the ship. They scan the planet and they say that, like, oh, this seems better than the planet we were going to. So, like, I can understand why nobody would just want to wear their helmets. That being said, them not wearing their helmets directly leads to everything that happens in that movie.
Yep.
But at least I can understand. And those people aren't scientists; they're colonists.
That's true.
So there's at least a better defense there. But I mean, people complain about it in Prometheus, but them taking off their helmets doesn't actually lead to any problems.
No.
Like it's all the black goo and messing with that stuff that kind of starts the downward spiral.
Yeah, and like I said, I missed the I missed David putting the black goo in what's his name? Holloway's drink. So the only thing I could think of was that it must have like fallen from the ceiling in the cavern that they were in when he was walking around without his fucking helmet. Sorry, can we swear?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, because David takes the can. So when they open the chamber and like it affects the air in there, the black goo starts leaking out of the canisters because the atmosphere has changed. David takes one of the canisters and there's a scene.
I did see that, and I saw him like take it out and look at it.
So what he does is he puts like the drop on his hand, and there's that line. He's holding it up, and he's like, "Oh, big things have small beginnings," or whatever. It's implied that it's still on his finger when he goes to Holloway. Gotcha. And then he literally asks him for permission, is the way that's kind of viewed to me, because he's like, "What would you do?" And then he says he would do anything, and then he's like, "Well, I'll drink to that," and he hands him the drink, and there's a clear shot of him dipping his finger in the drink. Gotcha. And so that's how that happens.
Yep, I saw all that, but I missed the part where he was dipping his finger, where he dipped his finger in the drink.
Yeah, and it's again, you say you're watching it at work. It's
best I can do.
Yeah. But hey, I saw this in the theater and I missed some of this stuff. So like the worm scene, like and I think some of this was brought up. I don't know if you watch any of the Red Letter Media stuff, but they have a video where they kind of attack this movie, I guess is one way to say it, where it's just one character sitting there asking the other guy questions of like, why did they do this? Why was it like this? What about this? And the other guy just doesn't answer. He just sits there and stares dumbfounded. And like, I don't know. I think it'd be fun to kind of go back through that video now, having seen it a bunch of times. Because, a lot of reviewers and stuff, they'll watch a movie once and then they put out this stuff. I'd be interested to go through and see if I have an answer for a lot of that stuff now. But, I'm not going to sit here and say it's a perfect movie. I'm just going to say there's a lot of things I will forgive about it.
And I will even go so far as to say that after this conversation, I am probably more willing to revisit it than I would have been otherwise.
Yeah.
To give it a fair shake. Because I will acknowledge that watching it while I'm working on a peripheral monitor probably isn't the best best environment.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, it was one that grew on me. Like I liked it when it came out, and it sounds like my initial viewing, I liked it more than your initial viewing.
Like
even
slime mold.
Yeah. But like
come up with something gross every time you say it grew on me.
Because it's a movie, so like often when I'm doing other things, like if I'm playing games or working on something or whatever, I'll often just set up my iPad and go in like my iTunes library and just just pick a random movie. And this for a while was one I would just click on. And so I think just over time, just kind of watching, I was like, oh man, I really like that, or like this is this is kind of nice. I don't know what it is. It is eye candy, and like the sound effect, like listening to this or watching this movie in headphones and everything, like just the way it's edited and mixed, something about it is just pleasant to me to like absorb. I love how clean it looks. I love how nice it looks. I love how great it sounds. Like I said, from a production level, I think it's maybe some of the best work in Hollywood. I think most of the problems of this movie come down to the script.
That is definitely a fair assessment. I would agree on pretty much all counts. The script and maybe some of the performances.
Okay, so what performances did you not care for? Because I actually like a lot of the performances.
I think I do think that the geologist guy felt like he was trying a bit too hard. I felt like Vickers.
I would agree with that.
Charlize Theron was a bit wooden, and like she's a military stiff or whatever. But she really didn't. I don't feel like she justified her existence.
I will
She
say,
was,
as the Academy Award winner on the cast, she is kind of the weakest one. Like, I think she's
yeah,
fine, but yeah, her character is a little one note of just like, I'm the person who doesn't want to be here. But
yeah,
honestly, maybe the only person who has an arc in the movie of she's like, I don't want to be here. I don't believe in any of this. But by the end, she obviously believes because she's seen it with her own eyes. And
yeah.
it
But
might,
she's still like she's not like, if you look at, say, Idris Elba by contrast, he's very obviously the whole time he's there for a paycheck. He's not interested in what's going on. He's
yeah,
sort of acting selfish in a like charming, lovable Idris Elba sort of way. But by the end of the movie, he at least is willing to make that sacrifice. So he has grown a little. So
he's the one hero.
I guess my statement before about how there's no growth or no character arcs is a little incorrect, because he grows a bit, and his two buddies, Benedict Wong and whoever else,
Yeah.
they're willing to go there with him, but they got like 8 minutes of screen time
Yeah.
altogether. So
They
nothing
got
like
some
that.
fun little banter, and that's kind of all they get.
Right. But if you contrast Idris Elba's character with Charlize Theron's character, yes, she acknowledges that the thing that she has now seen with her own eyes is real, but
Yeah.
she's still like,
If she
even to
doesn't
the very end,
change.
she's not willing to contribute in any way. Like, when Idris Elba is making this big sacrifice, she's running for the escape pod.
Yeah. And I mean, she's trying to talk him out of it even. She's like, no, just get
Mm-hmm.
us out of here. He's like, yeah, but if I
Yeah,
do that, there's no point. They're just going to go kill everybody.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So she doesn't change at all, which I guess I can say I'm kind of okay in a movie like this, because
Well, and like, every character doesn't need to change. I
no.
would say that, like, over the course of, in the first Captain America movie, Steve Rogers doesn't change, but he's a compelling character who is played convincingly and effectively,
Yeah.
by Chris Evans.
That is also
And
a weird case because I actually just watched, I don't know if you're familiar with the YouTube channel Lessons from the Screenplay.
oh yeah,
He recently
great stuff.
posted a video looking at the characters of Captain America and Iron Man throughout the
Mhm.
entire MCU.
Okay.
And it's like, so Iron Man or Tony Stark has a character arc in the first Iron Man movie, but you have a point about Steve Rogers, but it's weird because the way that series is structured is like, there's an arc throughout all of the movies, not just like
Mhm.
the single movie. Because you look at
Right.
Captain America Civil War, and he's a different character than he is in Captain America the First Avenger.
Oh, absolutely. Like,
Um,
I really enjoy how those two characters kind of their entire ideologies like start on opposite ends of the spectrum,
yeah,
and then through the course they kind of meet in the middle, and then continue to go through and are end the movies on almost opposite ends of the
yeah,
spectrum until Endgame.
and that's like the same point he makes in that video too.
Right.
And honestly, almost made me cry. It's really well done. But
But
I
even
guess
in that
oh, go
even
ahead.
in that first Captain America movie, like, when we didn't know about his 10-year arc, even in
Yeah.
that first one, he's still a compelling character, even though he does not change, because he
Yes.
changes the people around him.
Yeah.
And again, it's a compelling performance by Chris Evans, and I really love Charlize Theron in other things, but
Yeah.
like,
And
she
here
was
she's just kind of there.
I was bored every time she was on screen, which
Yeah.
is not something that I would ever want to say about. It's like, I've never said that about Charlize Theron before, ever.
Yeah. Yeah, and even her most compelling scenes are like when she's with other people, and the other people are compelling. Like her scene with Idris
they're
Elba
compelling
when they're
in
just kind of
spite of
chatting.
her.
Yeah. Like I love every interaction she has with Idris Elba in the movie. Like in the beginning, he's putting up the little
Mhm.
tree, and she's like, "What are you doing?" He's just like, "It's Christmas."
He's like, it's Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then just their little chat. He's like, like, are you a robot? Like the way he's just
Right.
talking to her and stuff. I always forget how much fun like he kind of has in this movie with what little time he does.
For sure.
But like I do love the idea that Shaw is kind of the voice of reason of the movie by the
Mhm.
end of it. Like, in the beginning, she's like everybody else, big eyes, open hearts, hoping they can find some cool stuff. But by the end of the movie, she's like, we gotta get out of here. Like, this is not what we thought it was, and nobody is listening to her. Like, she is
Yeah.
probably the smartest person in the ship, and nobody cares.
At first, it's all oohs and ahs, and then the running and the screaming.
Exactly. Yeah. Um, so I mean, hey, maybe that's an argument for her arc. Is in the beginning she say, "Hey, we're going on this great scientific thing. We're going to meet our makers." And at the end, of like, "No, this is all horrible. Turn around, go back." But that's
Yeah,
a that's a hard
that's an
argument to make.
unsatisfying arc.
Yeah, and I do wonder how much lifting they were expecting a sequel to do, and how much
Mhm.
that changed. Because I do feel like the sequel was a lot of Fox stepping in and be like, "No, aliens," and they're like, "All right, well, we got to put the aliens in." So I do wonder if that was lost, and I was always confused about the idea to kill her character because she did film stuff for the movie. There is a
Yeah.
prologue on the Blu-ray that features her.
Hmm.
And I think she did do some like the recording they find in the movie, I think is her voice and stuff. So maybe they only had her for a limited amount of time, but
Maybe.
I was always curious like why that was just dropped the way it was, and if it was because Fox forced them to like take a different path. Um So I guess we've been kind of going for a little while here. So I do want to ask, like, what were the biggest positives you took out of the movie?
The biggest positives are stuff that we've already mentioned. Like you said, it is a very good looking movie. It is a
Mhm.
very good sounding movie, and some of the creature designs are really interesting and really cool.
Yeah.
I actually really liked the like the cuttlefish like thing
They actually
that
it is called a trilobite. I know way too much about this stuff.
okay, that that Shaw was pregnant with,
Yeah.
circumstances of the pregnancy notwithstanding. I do, and like I said, I like Michael Fassbender. I think that
Mm.
he is exceptionally good at being weird and creepy and dark, and
Yeah.
that is on full display here.
He manages to do a wooden performance of a robot with more emotion than like half the cast.
Then
It's
Charlize Theron did for sure.
Oh yeah, 1,000%. Like I love the way he carries himself as
Mhm.
David, and even as Walter, the other android in Covenant too. Like I
Yeah.
mean, playing dual roles in that movie, and he's still just nailing it.
Yeah, and like I said, I think the creature effects were really cool. I think some of the deaths were appropriately gruesome.
Yeah,
um yeah, it just, I guess at the end of the when the chips all fall, that isn't quite enough for me.
yeah,
Like, the as you said, the script is a bit, is lacking, and the performances a bit were, I keep saying a bit, the performances were lacking
yeah,
to what I want in this kind of movie. I guess I expected, well, I didn't expect, because I've heard from a lot of people that it was bad, but
yeah,
I would normally expect more
yeah,
from a film than just good special effects and cool deaths.
yeah. Which it does have those in spades.
It has
Um,
those in spades.
but I mean, so does Covenant, and that's a worse movie by the end. And I would argue Covenant has even better deaths for the most part.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean that's not going to carry your movie. I don't know why I can look past a lot of stuff. I understand the flaws of this movie, but there's
Mhm.
just something about it that pulls me in. I'm a big sci-fi fan. Like it's if I look at my shelf here of my movies and stuff, it is a lot of sci-fi. And
Nice.
the Alien franchise in particular, like Aliens
Sure.
is in my top 5 movies. So anything that kind of touches that,
Mhm.
um, I'm obviously gonna like a little more. There are things obviously that are hard to defend, but it's just one of those things where I chalk it up to, like it doesn't hurt, it doesn't hurt the movie for me, and I can't explain why. It's just it's a movie I like.
Yeah, and it's again, I I went into it kind of expecting to hate it, and I didn't hate it,
Yeah,
which is a
which for me is a
compliment in and
win.
of itself,
Yeah,
right? And I'm
it's a movie that has a reputation, and for me, like I always see it as a positive when somebody goes into a movie like, oh, I've heard all this negative stuff. And like, hey, you know what? It wasn't that bad.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't that bad. And that is a good description of how I felt leave like after it was over. I was like, yeah, that wasn't as bad as everybody said it was.
Yeah. And, you know, like I said, I ran into this movie in a ton of different ways that were not actually watching the movie.
Right.
So I have all this stuff in my brain that just like, oh yeah, that is interesting, even if it doesn't actually matter to what's on the screen, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah. I guess that's kind of it.
Yeah.
I can't
cool.
think of any other point I want to make.
Thanks for making me watch this dumb movie.
No problem. I will. That's my favorite part about this podcast is I am the next 2 episodes I have set to record are both movies I've never seen.
Oh, nice.
So that's kind of the fun of it is I'm going to experience new things and my guests are going to experience new things. And
sure.
You get to be the first one. So
I love it.
I mean, I don't know what release order this is going to go in, but let it be known this was the first recorded.
Let it be known.
But yeah, you know, you have your own podcast. Would you like to give that a plug or anything else?
Sure. Yeah. I record and produce a podcast called Recorded Tomorrow. It's all about time travel and how to use it effectively when telling stories, when writing fiction. My co-host Jonathan and I break down what we think of as the fundamental rules of time travel and pitfalls to avoid and how to be consistent and how to do things better. We recently have started taking like analyzing and taking examples of like taking movies and books and things like that and breaking them down and seeing how well they follow these rules and how like if they affect things. This show's kind of on hiatus for the moment. We're still putting together how we're going to move forward. Our most recent episode that probably by the time this airs will still be the Bill and Ted Face the Music episode, which was fantastic. We actually managed
that movie.
It's so good. We actually got Spiros Mihalakis, who is a quantum physicist and science consultant for the movie.
Wow.
To talk to us and sit down with us.
How did you pull that off?
I literally just asked him on Twitter if he would come on.
I've gotten so many of my guests that way.
And
it's nice when it works.
Yeah, no, it's great. But that's the most recent one. I'm a pretty frequent guest on the School of Movies podcast, which is a film analysis show by my friends Alex and Sharon Shaw, who just like do really deep analysis of films in general. Most recently, the one that I was on is on a Richard Curtis movie About Time, which is big surprise, another time travel one. I actually he is also an author, and I consulted for him on a time travel novel that he just wrote called Back in Time and Space.
Oh, nice. I actually have I have a friend as well that is writing a time travel novel right now.
Nice. And yes, you can find our podcast wherever you find podcasts in general. It's called Recorded Tomorrow, or you can reach out to us on Twitter at Time Travel Pod.
All right. This actually reminds me, I was having a conversation with an old coworker. We were just working one day talking about time travel. I can't even remember what prompted it, but I was talking about, some movies kind of approach time travel differently. And I think we were originally talking about the Star Trek 2009 version. And then I was discussing the idea of like, oh, well, if time travel existed, we would kind of know because somebody would have done it already. Like if the version of time travel, like, hey, if I time traveled back to right here, right now, I would appear right here, right now from the future. And he just didn't get it. He just could not wrap his mind around that concept. But he's like, but it hasn't been invented yet. I'm like, yeah, but in the future it will be. And if we time travel, we would show up. He's like, yeah, but it's not real yet. And I'm just like, okay, just never mind. And it was like it was like an hour-long conversation of just trying to explain to him, but like, yes, but the future would happen and then it would happen. He just didn't get it.
Has he seen The Prisoner of Azkaban?
He was actually a huge Harry Potter fan.
So I mean, that's how time travel works in that
Yeah.
universe, is the same way.
I wish
And
I
it's
had thought of
also
that at the time.
it's the same as Bill and Ted too, does the same thing.
Yeah.
The way I like to explain that one is, if you like, if you think of the timeline as like your experience of the timeline as a ribbon,
Yeah.
and traveling back in time in that way is like taking the ribbon and folding it around itself
Yeah.
a little bit, and then so you have there's
Like a
these
little
two
knot.
well, not even a knot, just like wrap it around, like, so let's say like wrap it around a pole or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a small section of that timeline, if you just look at it after that's happened from left to right, there's a section of that timeline where both ribbons are there.
Yeah.
And from, it's just a matter of shifting perspectives. So the first time you see it, you're going through on the bottom ribbon, and then the second time you go through that timeline, you're at the top ribbon. But it's the same it's the same stretch of time in both cases.
Yeah. See, I just needed you there to help explain it to me.
If you really want to like destroy his brain, have him watch Predestination.
I have heard of that. I have not seen that.
It
also, what is the one about the guys in the garage or whatever?
Primer?
Yeah, I've never seen that one either.
I'm probably blasphemous for saying it, but I'm not a big fan of Primer.
Oh, okay. I know nothing about it. It's one of those ones I've tried to know as little about because I know I'm going to see it one day. So I just know it's time loops and stuff like that.
Yeah, and like people really like that one because the science is really good.
Yeah.
And like the science is really good and makes a lot of sense and everything. My problem with that is, again, much like with Prometheus, I expect more.
Yeah.
And the like Primer feels like the creators spent so much time getting their mechanics right that they forgot they were making a movie.
Yeah,
and
like
that they were telling a story.
Book.
Well, no, like just it would have made a better instruction manual.
Oh, okay.
Like it's a pair of characters that you don't sympathize with ever. Yeah. And the plot is such that it is, it is there to facilitate the time travel. Like I said, it feels like they spent so much time on that they forgot to tell a story along the way, where it really should be the other way around, where, time travel is a tool that you use to tell better stories, as opposed to the story being a tool that you can use to describe your time travel mechanics, which is how Primer feels.
Predestination's the one you're talking about, right?
Yeah, with Ethan Hawke and Sarah Snook.
I think I remember this coming out. I looked it up because I want to look that up.
But it is the mind fuckiest movie, like the biggest mind fuck you will ever see.
Okay, I'm gonna check that one out. But all right, man. Thank you for coming on and doing this. And,
thanks for having me. This is fun.
Watching that movie. Maybe we'll get you on as a guest. You can pick your own movie next time.
Sure.
But yeah, be sure to check out his podcast. I actually subscribed to it right before the show, so I'm going to check that out as well. And yeah, not really sure what to go out on because this is all before the show is launched. So we'll just end it right here.
I believe in you.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me, man.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
All right.